So, thank you for joining me. Now, your blog is leaveyourdailyhell.com, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So, just give me like an overview of your background and how you got started and just your story.
Okay, so I guess the place it all starts is about 6 years ago in 2009. I was a few years out of college, and I was very professionally confused. And unfortunately, due to the economic downturn, I found myself fired as a server in a restaurant. So I was pretty much confidence-wise at the lowest place I'd ever been in my life, and I didn't really know what to do. And somewhere along the way that summer, I hatched the idea that I should move to China to teach English, which is what a lot of my other liberal arts degree holders had done. And so in November of 2009, I moved to China, Shanghai, China, to teach English. And when I was over there, I started moonlighting in online journalism, first writing for blogs and then writing for larger publications and so on and so forth. And it was while I was doing that I hatched the idea that maybe I could start a travel blog. Travel blogs were very new things around that time. And I had planned, once I saved enough money in China, to leave and travel anyway. So I bought the leaveyourdailyhell.com domain name with the intention of attempting to travel blog once I did leave. And so I finally left in July of 2010, less than a year after I arrived in Shanghai. And at that time, I started the blog as more of a hobby. I had all my freelance writing projects that I was doing for money, and my blog was more of a hobby. But what happened is over the years that I was traveling and writing and building my blog up, it got popular enough that I was able to start selling advertisements and going on paid trips and so on and so forth. And so over the years, my blog has become my primary source of income.
Wow.
Yeah. Very condensed version.
Right, right. So, what were some of the places that you visited when you were just starting your blog? And, like, how many countries have you been to? I mean...
Well, at this point, I think I've been to about 75. I really don't count religiously anymore because I feel like I did that for a long time when I started traveling, and I think it started to kind of defeat the purpose of travel because travel is not necessarily about getting as many stamps in your passport as you can or having as many notches in your belt as you can. But when I first left China, I actually flew to Vietnam first. I backpacked through Vietnam for 3 weeks. I crossed over into Laos and was there for about a week. I went down into Thailand and Malaysia for a couple weeks and then over to Singapore. Then I flew to Beirut, Lebanon, and took my first ever trip to the Middle East. I spent about a month there in Lebanon, Israel, Jordan, and then up to Turkey. I stopped briefly in Europe to see my best friend Bianca, who lives in Switzerland. And then I actually headed home to Austin about a year after I left to teach English and kind of regrouped. And basically I did do that, so that took about 3 or 4 months. And I have done these longer stints of travel, but unlike a lot of travel bloggers who are permanently nomadic, I base myself here in Austin, Texas, and I take my trips from here because for me, I find that I really need to regroup when I finish with the trip. There's a lot to process creatively and emotionally. It's very physically exhausting, and it's nice to sleep in your own bed and have friends you've known for a long time and food you love to eat. And of course, you live in Florida, so you understand wanting to have a warm place as well. So,
So do you have family there in Austin also?
No, interestingly enough, I don't. I was actually born in Houston and my mom grew up there, but I chose to move to Austin after college just for no particular reason. I mean, it was kind of becoming the cool city that it is now then, but I didn't know anybody here, although my dad did just come and visit me this past weekend, so I had family here, but he was just visiting, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. So do you have a rough number of how often you travel throughout the year, or what's the ratio?
I would say I spend about 40% of my time on the road and about 60% of my time here. For example, I would say just the past few months, I was out of town for about 10 days in June. I was gone for about 2.5 weeks in July. and I plan to be gone for a couple weekends in August. So it balances out to about 40% away, 60% here. But it's not an exact science, and it's one of those things where I would say about half of my trips are trips that I choose to take, that I really want to go to X, Y, or Z place, and I'll usually go for about 7 to 14 days on those trips. And then the other half of my trips are trips that I get invited on by tourism boards and travel companies. And those really vary in length. Some of the more corporate ones, like I was just in Utah with GMC last month, and that was about 4 days because I'm sure it was a very expensive trip for them to put on, so they're not going to keep us there forever, whereas some of the other trips last about a week. So really depends, but I try to, believe it or not though, the older I get, I try to spend as much time as possible here as I can, just because, you want to, I love traveling, but I also want to maintain some semblance of normalcy. Almost all of my friends have regular jobs, so I don't want to be, I don't want. It's great to climb a mountain and watch the sunset, but it sometimes sucks to do it alone. So. Yeah.
So on that subject, do you travel most of the time by yourself, or do you have people that have gone with you?
Well, I travel alone more than I would really like to, because most of my friends do have regular jobs. Now this year, I've been lucky enough that several of my trips have been accompanied. I have a good friend named Dora, who we've been on many trips together in the past, even before I moved to China. And she's come to Thailand with me this year and also to Cuba. And in September, I'll be going to Alberta, and my sister's going to come with me then. So that's really exciting. But yeah, unfortunately, just out of practical necessity, a lot of my trips have been solo. I would say a vast majority of them. So.
Right. Well, that's cool. Yeah, I remember just last year I went on my first trip internationally, and I went on a cruise. It was on a cruise, and I went with my sister and then a close friend of ours. But it was a little intimidating at first because we actually couldn't. My sister and I were underage to go on the cruise by herself, so that's how we got a friend to go with us. So I would definitely say, for us, it was good to go with someone the first time, but now that I've done it once, I guess I could probably do it by myself. But I guess also being a girl, it can be a little different, solo travel.
Yeah, I would imagine, although believe it or not, I know a lot of women who travel to very exotic places by themselves. So I think a lot of it, and this is even true as a male, is that a lot of it is psychological. You convince yourself of all this stuff, and you hear all these bad news in the media. And I think really, as long as you're not, a drunk, slobbery mess walking around a city in the middle of the night with valuables, the world is mostly a safe place. I really genuinely believe that. So.
Yeah. That's good to know, because I know for a lot of people that I want to, I talk to and stuff like that, they're always really skeptical of traveling by themselves or going out of the country the first time. So that's good to know. And for the most part, that's the same experience I had. I didn't have any crazy experiences so far.
Right.
Yeah. So, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your photography. I know that there's a lot of photos on your website.
Yeah.
You have some really great shots on there. So, do you make some money with your photography, or is that more of a hobby?
Well, it's interesting. I have made a lot of money with my photography, mainly selling it back to tourism boards who invite me on certain trips. Honestly, it's hard to say though, because I love writing and photography equally. I started out as a writer. That was what I studied in school, and it's been my passion forever. When I was a child, I actually loved drawing before I ever had a camera, and photography's really been a secondary passion. But I definitely wish that I could do more with my photography than I've done. I think that the thing about having a website is that a lot of how you get noticed, in addition to social media, is being able to rank in search traffic, which is of course based off the words you write. So it's very easy to target that and get people to come to your website based off of certain things, whereas targeting people based off of images is not quite as easy, especially due to some recent changes in how Google works. And so unfortunately, while I have made some money off my photography, whether I'm selling it back to tourism boards or selling it as part of stories, to magazines or other websites. I would love, for example, to put out a coffee table book or have my photos displayed in a gallery somewhere, but that part of the business is not as I don't want to say as easy, because it's not easy to sell your writing either, but it's not as there's not as much of an established protocol for that. Among people who are not already employed by magazines or so on and so forth. So it's not just a hobby, but is not as much of an economic engine as I would like it to be.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
yeah.
So do you have like a crazy, interesting story that you could tell me, like one of your favorite memories or something from your travels?
Well, I have a lot of interesting stories, and I have a lot of really terrible stories, and I think the terrible ones are a little bit more funny to look back on. I would say probably the worst thing that ever happened to me. A few years ago, I was in Myanmar, which is a country I always really wanted to visit because it's gotten a bad reputation in the international media. And, I've been an underdog all my life, and so I really like to take places and people and things that have also been underdogs and play the devil's advocate and show people another side of them. So I was really excited about my trip to Myanmar. And I started off in the capital city, which is Yangon, and I traveled up to Mandalay, and I was going to take this boat ride down a river to Bagan, which is this place that has like 4,000 temples and hot air balloons flying over them, and it's been on several Lonely Planet covers. It's one of those types of places. And I was so excited, and the night before I went on the trip, I went to this local restaurant with this dude I had met in the airport who decided that we would travel together. And, I've unfortunately had food poisoning many times in my travels, but it's never been super severe. But when this started coming on, I thought, oh my God, I guess I'm probably not going to be able to go on that boat trip. And as it turned out, it was so severe, and I got so weak that I literally had to crawl between my bed and the toilet when I had to vomit. And I was sick for about 3 days. And it was that long before I could find a hospital. And at which point I went to the hospital. I had to go there in the back of a pickup truck because Myanmar wasn't open at that time, so they didn't have modern cars and their roads weren't paved right. So I had to travel like 30 minutes in the back of this pickup truck with like 104-degree fever. And then I finally got there, and this doctor, who I don't know where he got his education or whatever, he basically examined me for about 5 minutes and gave me 7 different kinds of pills. And the good news is that at that point, I was well enough to go to a travel agency and book a flight back to Bangkok, where I fully recovered. But I guess the moral of the story is that I think we think about the world as being dangerous in terms of maybe being robbed or pickpocketed or shot or whatever, but sometimes it's things you eat. And unfortunately, I really had my ass handed to me in that situation. So,
wow. Yeah, that's I've never had anything like that, but so because the country, I've only been to like countries in Europe right now. Like I'm working in other countries, but how many other than Switzerland? You said you've been to, right?
Yeah, I've been to most of Western Europe. So I've been to Portugal, Spain, France, Switzerland, Italy, Liechtenstein, Vatican City, Germany, Netherlands, Belgium. Not sure if I said France, but I've been there. Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland, Hungary, Slovakia, Greece, Romania, and I think that's it. But I've been a lot of places in Europe. I've been there many times. It was the first place I went to, and it's a really easy place to go back to, and a really wonderful place to go back to. So yeah.
So having gone to all those different countries, let's say like somebody that never traveled internationally, but they wanted to go over to Europe. What is your opinion on the possible language barriers, and do you find that a lot of people speak English as well?
Well, here's the thing, is that I think that language barriers are really starting to become a thing of the past because so many young people, for one reason or another, for work or for school, are having to learn English, and a lot of people want to because of the ubiquity of American culture, be it music or film or celebrities, the Kardashians and things like that. I think for me what it is more is I don't want to seem like an entitled American jerk and just walk into places speaking English. So I speak a bit of Spanish, which I've learned traveling. I speak a bit of French, which I studied in school, a little bit of German. And I find that with a little bit of knowledge in the main languages of Europe, you can get by where people don't speak English, which isn't very much. And you also avoid feeling like a jerk. Because the thing is that while I would love to say that I go out of my way to learn a good amount of the language in every country that I visit, it just isn't practical with the amount of traveling I do. But then on the other hand, like I said, I don't feel like there is much of a language barrier in Europe anymore. So, you know.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I found too. When I visited the Netherlands for like 2 weeks when we got off the ship, and I
Oh, nice.
found that a lot of the younger people, like in the grocery stores and stuff, they would all know English, and then some of the older people that we ran to couldn't really communicate as well. So is that what you found also?
Yeah, it is definitely because I think that that English wasn't compulsory until about 20 or 30 years ago in school. So a lot of these older people, unless they had some professional reason to learn it or they traveled abroad, they wouldn't know it. But and I find that if anything, a lot of the younger people they want to speak English even when you want to speak their language because it helps them travel, it helps them be marketable in the job market, and so it's if anything, sometimes it's hard. Like I remember a few years ago, again in Switzerland, I go there a lot because my best friend is from there. But I took a German course, and I was like trying to practice out and about, and people would hear that I wasn't a native speaker, and they would just switch to English. And so, if anything, sometimes it's a bad thing. So,
Right. Huh. So, I think there was one more question. So do you have any goals, like either for travel or professionally for your business that you're working on right now? Any kind of projects?
well, I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm working on anything in terms of like putting all my energy into it, but I am kind of gathering ideas for some kind of book right now. I've wanted to write a book for a long time, but I think the problem was is that I didn't know if I wanted to do something more practical or something more autobiographical. I didn't know if I wanted to maybe go into the realm of fiction and do a novel using my travels as inspiration. I thought briefly about doing something sci-fi related. And now I think I've kind of settled on the fact that I want to do kind of a collection of personal, humorous, and really vivid essays. I haven't really started writing yet. I'm more just in the grouping ideas phase. So I would like to have some kind of book written at least within the next year. It'd probably take a little bit longer than that to get published. I've been approached by certain publishing companies to write things, but of course, when that happens to you, they want you to write something they already need written, and they want to pay you almost nothing. And I guess my idea would be to maybe write my book, start distributing it digitally, and then hopefully get in contact with some publisher who would like it well enough to take over distribution. So that would be one goal. As I said to you earlier, I would love to have a coffee table photography book, and to have my work shown in galleries and to even display. Like, for example, one idea someone gave me is, to put my photos, for example, from Vietnam in a Vietnamese restaurant and maybe sell them or something. I'm always looking for ways to expand. I mean, one of my long-term goals is that I would love to host a travel TV show. I don't want to produce my own travel TV show because that is, I do everything on, so that's another thing. I do everything on my website. I do the photography, the writing, the web design, the advertising, the promotion. Every aspect of the site is me, and yet in terms of doing a TV show or something bigger, I think those really have to be a team effort, and I don't have a team yet. So I would love to be a host of someone else's TV project. And then in terms of travel, it's hard to say because with a few exceptions, I've basically visited all the big places that were on my list. There's, of course, dozens of other places that I would really like to get to. It's not one of those things where I'm going to die if I don't, get to Turkmenistan or something as much as I'd like to go there. But I think more than anything, my goal with travel is to continue achieving a greater balance between my life here at home and my life abroad, and to be able to make that more seamless Because I still do feel now like there is a divide, not between who I am when I go abroad and when I'm here, but I feel like I almost have two lives. And that's cool in a way, I guess, but it's also can be really confusing emotionally. And I hope that the more I travel, the less confusing it gets.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. So, because you're saying, like, basically, you know, I mean, obviously you're still pretty young. And I know that a lot of people, especially when we're younger, we want to go places, meet new people, and that's like a big pull for us in like, you know, 20 to 30 age group and so on.
Yeah.
But as you get older, and you know now you've already visited so many places, would you say that the desire to travel so much kind of lessens, or do you still see yourself traveling a lot?
I still see myself traveling a lot, and it's not the desire to travel that's lessened. I think what it is, though, is you realize that, like I was saying earlier, it's great to go all these places, but sometimes, and it's not even necessarily about just having a person there, being alone or being with a friend, whatever. It's great to have all these outstanding experiences, but it's like, you know, I told you I had my dad here this weekend, and there's something to be said about you can achieve all these wonderful things and do all these incredible feats, but in a way, I guess what I'm starting to realize is that it's not the only thing that matters. I think for so long, you know, like a lot of people, I grew up in a very ordinary middle-class home, and no was my parents' favorite words, and Red Lobster was a special destination for us to go to, and I really spent a lot of my 20s wanting to do all these extraordinary things that I could never do when I was growing up. And I think now I'm just coming around to realize how special some of the people in my life are, and some of the things I always took for granted. And so no, I don't want to travel less. I think though I do want to spend more time with my family, and I do want to make sure that my friends know how much I appreciate them. I would like to be in a relationship, but that of course is very hard when you're on the road all the time. So like I said, I think it's just about wanting to strike a greater balance, and to temper my desire to travel with my necessity for, you know, something greater than that. So,
yeah. So one last question. As far as going to like tourist destinations when you go to a certain country, what's your opinion on, you know, the tourist spot versus just the everyday life, smaller areas that not many people know about? Have you been to like the tourist spots, or do you prefer going to the more local areas?
I prefer doing it all. I prefer doing as much as I can, you know. I've always said that, you know, there's a reason that millions of people visit the Eiffel Tower every year, or that everyone goes to Christ the Redeemer in Rio, you know, or most people who visit Beijing go to the Great Wall of China. I think that no amount of crowds or publicity or hype can ruin some of these incredible tourist attractions. I think furthermore, for photography, you know, even if you're not necessarily trying to take the best photo ever of the Colosseum, having these kind of ubiquitous reference points in your photos really gives them a frame of reference, and it provides context for where you are. And I think furthermore that when you're able to contrast the tourist spots with the local spots, it just makes your experience richer. You know, you don't have the light without the shadow, or the shadow without the light. So I think, you know, this whole tourist versus traveler debate that's been going on is really kind of counterproductive, because we're all really tourists and we're all travelers. And for me, I want to see everything and I want to do everything. So I think it's just as valuable to see the popular places as it is to wander down the dark alleys. So, and then I think to add to that really quick, I try not to make judgments on the way other people travel either, because I think that's sometimes where this goes too, is that some of these high and mighty travelers are like, oh, well, you know, if you go to these tourist attractions, you're not good enough to read my blog. And I think travel is an individual experience. We all travel for different reasons. And, you know, some people saw, you know, maybe they saw the pyramids in a book or a newspaper when they were younger, and it's been their lifelong dream just to lay eyes upon them. It's not anybody's place to judge that. So for me, people can travel whatever the way they want, and I want to see everything. So
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for answering all my questions. Before we go, do you have any like social media accounts, anything that you would want to share if somebody wants to connect with you, or just go to straight to your blog?
Well, I would say all my social accounts are linked on my blog at leadyourdailyhell.com. And although I do maintain an active social media presence, my blog is really my baby. That's what I love doing. That's my product. So I would say go there first, take a look around, and maybe follow me on social media. But yeah, go to my blog, and then and yeah, and feel free to explore. I have hundreds of articles and thousands of photos, and throughout many different phases of my life and travel, and I get emails every day from people who say they've been inspired, and I hope that anybody who visits my site is inspired to do great things with their life. So,
All right. Well, thank you, Robert.